All right, guys. Blake Lovell here, Southeastern 14. We're back talking SEC Big 12 Challenge for the final time. Um, this great, illustrious challenge. You can see our guest here, Christine Butterfield, who has done some. We're bringing her out of retirement, out of Big 12 podcast retirement. She's now covering UConn women's basketball, which talking about going from one level of dominance to another. Christine's laughing because she knows like this is the final time, our annual SEC Big 12 challenge show that I say annual, Christine. I think we actually started doing this last year. So like it's 2 years running, but I guess that still qualifies as annual, right?
Yes, the
Um
second time.
it still qualifies. But no, I'm excited to catch up with Christine because we always have a fun discussion. She knows the Big 12 very well, having been in that world for a long time. And so, Christine, it is great to have you on. I know you're excited to talk about some of these matchups and storylines heading into it because I think you're very confident the Big 12 is going to find a way to come up with a victory here in the final challenge.
I think so. I mean, I never know. Last year, I was super, super confident. And I was like, listen, they're going to come
You
in, they're
were.
going to do their thing. And I'm pretty sure the SEC won by at least one game, right? One or two.
It all runs together for me. Like I'm actually pulling it up now because I think one year I was like, oh yeah, I remember the SEC won that year. I brought this up to somebody the other day. Like, yeah, the SEC won 6-4 or something that year, and they're like, no, Big 12 won 7-3. I'm like, oh, well, okay. Like, I just like it. It all runs together. I feel like with the challenge, but um,
Yeah.
I do think though, like this year, look, I mean, I feel like we've said this, we've talked about it in the past. It's like the Big 12, we always say, well, what's the best conference in the country? Like, if you look at the Big 12, though, right now, I mean, I know because Kansas is on the slide, like people will be like, well, maybe it's not as strong as you think. But I keep telling everybody, look, some of these teams that have these kind of records, like Baylor's 5-3 in the Big 12, right? But
Mhm.
Baylor's still a very, very good team. And so I think that's something that it makes sense why when you look at some of these matchups, I mean, look how many sort of top tier teams I think there are in the Big 12 right now. And then the SEC, we keep talking about it. It's sort of, it feels like Alabama, Tennessee, and everybody else because, it's not to say that Auburn's a bad team, Missouri's a bad team, teams like that, but they're just not on that same level. Whereas I think you look at the Big 12 and it's like, well, look at what Texas has done, even without, the whole Chris Beard fiasco. And look, Kansas State's a top 5 team. Kansas may have a 3-game losing streak, but they've never lost 4 in a row under Bill Self and so on. It's just like the depth over there is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and they get used to that depth every single game. There's no gimme
Yeah.
games in that league. So the fact that they're able to build that endurance is, I think, why they end up being a lot of bracket busters come March. I think it's why they do well in the SEC challenge because they're just used to playing top teams twice a week when other teams, might have a big marquee game in the weekend, but then get
Yep.
to slum a little bit during the week. But there's some exciting matchups here. I think usually the Kansas Kentucky is the one that everyone is so pumped to watch. But this year, I think I might be going to Texas at Tennessee. I don't know. We're gonna get into
Well,
it. It'll be interesting this year for sure.
the thing is, like I was saying this, I mean, we can kind of start there because I think overall these are probably the top 2 games. Now we can make a case. I think if you look at like Baylor, Arkansas, I think because the way Arkansas is playing for me right now, I don't have a lot of confidence they're going to go in and win that game. But with Texas and Tennessee, it's like go back to last year. We're like, all right, the Rick Barnes Bowl is finally here. Like, yes, like this is going to be great. It was like 52-51. And so it's like, but that's the kind of game you expected from those two teams, right? Like you knew the style of play, that's exactly what it was going to be. And I think with this one, it's like, is it that much different? I look at Texas, there's still a lot of similarities. I think you can kind of look at how they play. And again, with Rodney Terry, what he's done, I mean, he's done a great job with that team, given everything and all the circumstances and all that. But I guess you also have a team that's gone from the extreme of playing, what was it? I was laughing because they played the 116-103 game against Kansas State. And then
Right.
they turn around and play the 56-46 game against Oklahoma State. And it's like, talking about going from one extreme to another with Texas. But
Welcome to the Big 12. That's all I
yeah,
have to
it's like
say. It's
that's what
never
happens, right?
you can never anticipate what's going to happen in this league because you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like an offensive powerhouse. Like they can shoot. And then Oklahoma State's defense says, nah, man, we're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna
I
trump
mean,
you.
But
So
it is like you look at this game, right? I mean, Tennessee is just, of course, Tennessee is probably the best defensive team in the country. I mean, just look at the numbers; like
yeah.
they are just ridiculous in what they've done. Chris and I were talking about this the other day. Like how many times Tennessee has allowed less than 60 points this season is just ridiculous. I don't even remember what the number is, but it's an insane number. And so now like you come into this game and Tennessee could still have some of those stretches offensively, although I think the Kentucky game was more of an outlier than sort of a common thing with this team. And Tennessee's gotten healthy. They got all their guys back now. But like this Texas team, if you're looking at it from Tennessee's standpoint, what are the things that kind of jump out with you with this Texas team? Because again, I think we know scoring wise some of the things they can do just given the group they have there. I guess if you're a Tennessee fan, you're kind of looking at some connections. Obviously, a former Vanderbilt guy there now, and Dylan DeSue at Texas. But what kind of stands out with you with this Texas team this season?
Well, what's interesting about Texas to me is I feel like they've always kind of lacked a certain identity. And I think even when Chris Beard was there versus now that he's not, they still don't seem to have one singular thing that they can hang their hat on and say, no matter what happens, we're going to do this really, really well. And we can rely on that to carry us through the rest of the game. They don't have that. They have these inconsistent shooting performances that you've alluded to where they scored 103 against Kansas State, which ended up being a Big 12 history game where
Yeah.
Kansas State scored 116 points, literally an NBA type score. And then they turn around, and I don't know if it's due to like their shooting arms were just way too tired. So they're just like, we're just going to lazily put these up against Oklahoma State. But regardless, they go in and they can't even get above 60. So to me, they are very, very inconsistent. They're very flashy. If their shots aren't falling early, that's really going to show in their confidence. And they're going to try to make some scrappy plays defensively, but that's something Tennessee can definitely turn around and use against them because if they're scrambling too much, it can just fall right into Tennessee's hands. And we've seen this Tennessee squad just score so much in the fast break, score so much in transition that I really think that if they can get a hold of Texas's offense early and kind of disrupt their ball movement and their rhythm, I think the game's probably going to be Tennessee's. But if Marcus Carr, if Timmy Allen comes out there and they start, firing off from three and they're feeling themselves, then we're going to have ourselves a really good game. I think it really kind of just comes down to that, is their confidence in the beginning and who can kind of own those opening possessions.
Yeah, Tennessee, like we said, defensively, their ability to force turnovers too is like, and that allows them to get out and get some easy basket. I think they're looking at the numbers here. I had to pull it up because I knew both teams were pretty high on that. Tennessee forcing 17.1 turnovers per game, Texas forcing about 16.7. Those are both around top 25 level. So I think that's it. Like, which team can get some easy baskets? Because I don't think it's going to come easy necessarily. Just in if you're playing in the half court, or
Mm-hmm.
I just think this is one of those games, and we saw that last year, right? I mean, I'm glad we don't have to see the game from last year again because it was kind of, as we know, a very wild but 52-51-esque game. It was something. I think that's the best word I can use for it. But
Yeah,
uh,
it
you
happened.
know, it happened. It was a game that took place. But I think we also saw in that game, what Texas could do defensively, because I feel like the last portion of that game, and I think this game could play out similarly, where it's like, okay, Tennessee had a stretch where they just couldn't score. Then Texas had a stretch where they couldn't score. And I think that's kind of what you could see here again, just based on how these two teams play on the defensive side, and specifically just looking at Tennessee's numbers, they are just ridiculous. But I'm kind of with you. I think Tennessee is probably the lean here. I picked them in our picks video we did, and I just think that they're hitting their stride now, having everybody back. But um, Kentucky, Kansas.
Oof.
I mean,
Oof.
but like, think about how interesting this game is now. I mean, really, where both teams were at on January the 10th. All right, let's say entering January the 10th. Kansas is on I don't remember what the streak was at that point. They're on a huge streak. Then they win the game into Oklahoma. They're 4-0 in the Big 12. Meanwhile, Kentucky just got blown out in Alabama. They come in and lose to a historically bad SEC team in South Carolina at home, which at this point, I honestly think that may be South Carolina's only win this season, or only win an SEC play, which will just be the stat of all stats. Like trivia, you and I, Christine, 25 years from now are going to be using that as a trivia note.
Oh, love that for us.
Yeah, I'm going to save that for you. But
I'll remember just for you.
It just thinking about where these two teams were at on January 10th to where they are now, like, it is completely sort of flipped because Kentucky's on a 4-game winning streak. They won
Mhm.
at Tennessee in a game no one thought they would win.
Right.
They beat a good Texas A&M team at home. They're playing better. They have more swagger. Like, Kentucky's gotten their swagger back, which
Yeah.
when Cal gets his swagger back, that's when
It's
you know,
dangerous. It's
that's when
dangerous.
you know things get serious.
Mhm.
But meanwhile, Kansas on a 3-game losing streak here. And yes, it's to Kansas State, TCU, Baylor, as we said, top tier teams in the Big 12. But still, I mean, they've never had a 4-game losing streak under Bill Self. What a stat that is. Not surprising, but it's a stat. And now they go into Kentucky, where Kentucky is seemingly, for the first time this season, figured it out.
Yeah.
Like, the setup here is just nuts. Again, considering where these two teams were even 2 weeks ago.
It's so bonkers how the narrative has completely changed around this team. I mean, first of all, the narrative around this matchup is always, blue blood against blue blood.
Yeah.
There's a, graphic put out by College Hoops from Fox about just how many wins they both have against all these teams and how they're only, I think, like even 50 apart in the thousands. It's just crazy
Yeah.
the history
Nuts.
that comes from both these programs. But this year, especially, this is going to be, I think, a very wild Kansas Kentucky team. We're watching a Kansas team right now who, like you said, they're struggling, but they don't have a big man inside. This is, I think, the first time we've seen Kansas play with such an undersized lineup where KJ Adams is playing the 5, but he's definitely not going to be able to handle Oscar Shibwe. So there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of tension, I think, in who they're going to try to be able to limit his production. And then you look to Grady Dick, who is their top perimeter shooter. He's the most efficient for sure. But obviously, people read the scouting reports. They know to guard him pretty close at this point. And he doesn't seem to have the arsenal within himself right now as a freshman to be able to know how to get open still. Jalen Wilson has been able to work on that, and he has this inner ability to always get open or to create his own shot. And that's why we're still seeing him put up the same numbers game after game. I mean, he was the only reason really, like, they were still in it against Kansas State. He scored like 30 something points, and he was the only reason that kept them going in this game because DeJuan Harris isn't a scoring threat. Kevin McCullough isn't a scoring threat. They really don't go into their bench that much outside of Pettiford and a few other rotational players that they'll go into if there's someone getting into foul trouble. But you're just looking at two completely different lineups here and two
Yeah.
completely different schools of thought in terms of how they're going to move the ball around. And I think if Kansas can find a way to limit Oscar Shibwe, they'll probably come on top. And I think they're going to come into this game knowing this is a huge turning point in their season. If they lose this game against Kentucky, it's really going to, I think, create a domino effect in terms of what people are talking about come March. But on the Kentucky side, this is a game for them that will qualify where they're at. If Kentucky
Yeah.
wins this game and they're on this 3-game winning streak, they're proving that they are coming into their own at the right time of the season, that they figured out all their internal issues, they figured out how to create a productive offense, and they're going to move forward. So I think in terms of who wins this game, it's going to have big implications for the rest of the season and for what the seeding happens in March, honestly.
Yeah, because it's like, and it's a good point because I brought this up yesterday. Was Kentucky won that game at Tennessee, and it's like, all right, you think Kentucky may be back, but it's only one game, right? And it comes right after just a historically bad loss to South Carolina.
Mhm.
But since then, they've beaten Georgia, they've beaten Vanderbilt. Yeah, they should have beaten those teams. Beat A&M at home, but like this to me is like that second step after the Tennessee win, which I think I'd throw the A&M one in there too because I think A&M's better than people give them credit for, but.
Sure.
Like, this is Kansas, though, right? Like, you win at Tennessee, you beat Kansas, do that all in a span of 2 weeks. Then you feel like you're back, like you're officially back and ready for the stretch run of the season. Meanwhile, you brought up a good point about Kansas here because think about this, and I looked at their schedule yesterday. If they lose to Kentucky, obviously the first time under Bill Self, they'd have a 4-game losing streak, right? But who's next? Kansas State at Iowa State, home against Texas. Like I said,
Mhm.
look, there's no way Kansas is going to have a 7-game losing streak. But like if it
It's
happened, it's not that insane. I mean, because you think about the level of competition, right?
I
So
do, yeah. I mean, I do think that they're going to end up beating Kansas State at
I
home
would think so.
because
Yeah.
they got pretty embarrassed in the Octagon of Doom, which it proved to hold up to its name in that game.
Yes.
So I think that they will take that home. But Iowa State in Ames is one of the wildest experiences. That's going to be a good one. And then Texas coming into Allen Fieldhouse is going to be another big matchup, like you said. So this
They
schedule
get
just
no
doesn't allow
break,
them.
right? They
Yeah,
just get no break. Yeah.
hashtag no breaks. But like literally, like they're going into Kentucky, right? And they know that this is going to kind of set the tone for them for the next stretch of their games. If they win this game against Kentucky, I'm not saying they feel like they have a cushion because you can't really think of your schedule like that, but I do think it would give them a confidence boost thinking like, okay, well, we came over this huge hump against Kentucky. We made sure that that Bill Self kept his little
Yeah.
flow going so we can move forward. I think there's going to be some huge identity issues if they end up losing to Kentucky. So this is a big game for both teams.
Yep, it's huge. And again, these are the two headliners just based on I think where these four teams are at right now. But that's not to ignore some of the other games. And by the way, we may ignore some of the other games. Not completely ignore them, but we may just mention that some of these other games are not exactly going to be on everyone's radar.
Right.
But we'll talk about those last just quickly. But I mean, I think there are some interesting games here in terms of. I mean, let's get this one out of the way. Alabama, Oklahoma. I mean,
Oh
we talked.
God.
I mean, we talked about this one again on our predictions video, and I just said, here's my issue: is if you're going to pick Oklahoma to beat Alabama,
which
Oklahoma's
you
2 and
should not.
6.
By
There
the
you
way,
go.
I
That's the
saw
quicker way.
I
That's the
saw
quicker
someone
way.
comment on your questions tweet about Oklahoma winning, and I was like,
Oh, I
that was
did see
the best
that.
laugh I got all day. I was
All
like,
right, so someone did say Oklahoma's going to blow out Alabama. I hope that was a joke. It looked like it was an Alabama fan that said it, so that's my guess, or maybe he's just furious some reason with his top 2 team.
okay.
But here's the problem, right? And I said, look, Oklahoma's played some close games. They got some close losses. A couple of those bounced their way. I mean, I think what was the number? I looked at it on this. Oklahoma's lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games this season by 4 points or less.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're just a bad team. But you want to talk about a styles clash. Like, I mean, you got a team that just plays a completely opposite style from Alabama. And my issue in this one and why I cannot possibly pick Oklahoma to win but they have played the good teams tough at home. Again,
Mhm.
that's something else to think about. Played Texas, Iowa State, Baylor, all tough. Lost them all, but they played them tough. I just don't know if they have the firepower or the defense to stop Alabama, who is really good in both areas.
I mean, you nailed it. I don't think that they have the shooting capabilities to outshoot Alabama. I think
Yeah.
defensively they're going to put them through a bit of a slog at least for a while. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
going to be a scoring drought for Alabama at some point in this game. If not in the middle of the first half, probably in the beginning of the second, I would project. But that being said, they just don't have any strong shooters that you can always go to. I mean, Jalen Hill has been probably their best role player for a few years now, but he's not going to go out there like
Right.
Porter Moser isn't going to be like, "Hey, Jalen, guess what? Now's the time to go out there and get 20."
Give me 35. Give me 35 right now.
Yeah, give me 35. Tanner Groves, even though he's like this huge lumberjack of a man in the paint, still isn't going to get you 20. Like he'll probably record a double-double, but it's just they don't have an offensive flow that they can like really impose their will on anyone. Defensively, they stay strong, but they've never had the type of poise that in these close games, like you were saying, they lose by 4, they lose by 6. They don't have the poise down the stretch to help them kind of calm down their nerves, to run out the possession clock, and to really get a perfect shot, be able to make that shot, and then get a stop on the defensive end. So I don't think that this game is going to be very close, but let's say it was. They don't have the poise down the stretch to be able to pull this one out against Alabama. I really think it's going to be a pretty rough game. Their only hope is if Sooner fans come out here with all their hatred for Alabama football and project that into the basketball arena, but doubtful, very doubtful that will happen.
Like, I mean, this is just like Tennessee, Texas. This is a future SEC matchup here. So, like, early on, like we got to start picking up the wins. Yeah, I think the only way you beat Alabama is if Alabama turns it over a lot, but Oklahoma doesn't really force many turnovers.
No,
I think they're one of the worst in the country at that, actually. And Alabama just is not hitting threes because we kind of saw
true.
some of this against Mississippi State the other night. Alabama, of course, had to rally to win that one to surprise some people. Mississippi State was the kind of team defensively that could force a few turnovers. Alabama didn't make a shot. I mean, they're 5 of 28 from three. I mean, that's just not Alabama. So that's it. I think if you do that for Oklahoma, but otherwise, I don't see the path necessarily against this Alabama team. So although it's an early game, I always say this, Christine. That's my thing now. Like early games, all bets are off. Like for some reason, just
Yeah.
chaos.
I like the there's a few 2 p.m. games here. This is one of them
Yeah.
where they're a toss up, you know? Like you
Yeah.
never really know quite what could happen. The marquee games, you could see anyone taking those, but in your projections in like the 2 p.m. games, you're like, okay,
Nuts.
I'm really not sure what energy is going to be in this game. So it's interesting to talk about. But as far as the 2 p.m. little series goes for Big 12 SEC, this would
You
not be
no.
on my big screen for sure.
No. I know you really want to get to LSU Texas Tech, but we might save that for later. I'm just sorry, LSU Texas Tech. We're
Oh,
not going to talk a lot about that game.
so sad.
I'm sorry.
I've been waiting patiently for this moment.
It's not a big game. Well, actually, it is a big game for both teams because they really need to both win.
Yeah.
So it actually is a big game in that regard. But we probably are not going to spend much time on that. All right, Christine, we have a lot of Arkansas fans on this channel. That's kind of our
Okay.
channel blew up, and it's because of Arkansas basketball fans. So we appreciate those folks. But I don't know if they're going to appreciate the trip to Baylor
Mm,
because to me, this maybe is the next game in line when you're talking about. Although I would kind of put Missouri, Iowa State, I think is intriguing too, and we'll talk about that one in a second. But I think this one, here's my issue, right? Having watched Baylor play, of course, having watched Arkansas play the entire season, without Nick Smith, like Arkansas offensively just is, they're just not the same team. And we've said this a lot, and people, can point out different things, but they're starting to, I think, play a little better defensively. My issue is this: Baylor, as you know, is a team that will play physical. They will get a lot of offensive rebounds. They'll get some second chance opportunities. They'll just Baylor you. I think I'll use that as a verb. Like, right? I mean, they're a Scott Drew team. This is, you can certainly compare and contrast the different teams he's had in the past, but like they play the same way. Like there's a style that they play that is very hard to go up against, and they also, I think, are very good at getting to the free throw line.
yeah.
Here's the problem with that: Arkansas's rotation right now is very slim because of Nick Smith not playing. Trevin Brazil's out for the year. So Muss is having to work with a lot of different rotations. And I think they're in a kind of a spot where they cannot afford to get in foul trouble because it puts them in a position where they have to play guys a lot more minutes than maybe they want to. And it's not knocking those guys. It's just the reality of what their rotation needs to be. If this was in Fayetteville, like I would say, all right, you could see Arkansas getting up big here and, not getting up big as in score wise, but like home atmosphere, that kind of stuff. But like
Sure.
Baylor's so good offensively. I don't love this matchup at all for the Hogs. Sorry, Hogs fans. I don't love it on paper, but
Oh gosh, I need to like keep myself calm for your Hogs fans so that they don't end up just despising me by the end of this podcast, but or streaming whatever this is. But like you said, they're so good offensively. They're the number 2 ranked offense on KenPom. Like they're just so efficient, and it's because they're able to crash the offensive boards.
yeah.
They do rebound well defensively, but it seems like they're just genetically injected into getting these offensive rebounds. They just rush to the rim and they're able to bounce higher than anyone and grab those things and then kick it out and
Yeah.
get a nice shot. I mean, I was thinking about Baylor earlier this season because they only had 2 non-conference losses. One was to UConn, which at the time looked like a good loss. Now is not looking so good. But they also lost to number 16 Virginia. Then you go into Big 12 play and they lost their first 3 in a row. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Jerome Tang is in
Yeah.
Kansas State now. I guess this is kind of the shift of nope. Just kidding. They won 5 straight after that,
Yeah, right.
including the most recent win against Kansas. So they're back to their old selves, and I think they've been feeling themselves a little bit lately, especially now that they just beat Kansas. That's going to be carrying them over into this game. I'm sure the place is going to be rocking because they beat Kansas in Waco. Now Arkansas is traveling to Waco. These fans are so pumped up at this point. The energy there is going to be insane, and this Baylor team really feeds off of that. And like you said, whenever they are really getting going offensively in their flow, they're able to get to the free throw line with ease. Like, they don't shoot a lot from the perimeter, but when they do, they crash the boards, get a second opportunity, usually get an and one. So if Arkansas is already going through rotational issues with the various injuries, it's going to look like it's going to get really messy for Arkansas, trying to figure out what different lineups they can put with this Baylor team.
Yeah, that's my thing. Is I'm just curious, kind of what Muss does here from a lineup standpoint, because like I said, Arkansas has been good defensively, and I think that's something they can use some things to kind of counter what Baylor can do. But I just worry about on the road. Arkansas is a team that fouls a lot, and if Baylor gets to the free throw line, I just wonder. Again, you have to shift so much in your rotation, like when you start to get guys in foul trouble, and when you don't maybe have the numbers you thought you'd have. This to me is the kind of game that catches up with you with that. Even though they've been able to get by with some of these other recent games against an Ole Miss or an LSU, but Baylor's just significantly better than both of those teams. But as always, I think Arkansas will have a shot, to give themselves a chance to win, because I think Muss does a pretty good job usually putting his guys in that position. But it's just offensively, can they without a 3-point without a 3-point element, they just don't have a 3-point shot right now. Can they trade twos with Baylor and do it consistently? I worry about that for Arkansas. But all right, let's talk about this Missouri Iowa State game, because I think this is one of the more interesting ones on the board here, because Missouri offensively, I mean, in the land of the SEC, Christine, where it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know, like
tell me about this
defense.
world.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like it's sort of it's a weird thing, but this is an interesting matchup to me. So for Missouri fans out there, Iowa State, tell them everything they need to know about the Cyclones.
Oh gosh, I mean, this team this year is intense. They're very intense. Their non-conference losses were to UConn in the Phil Knight Invitational, and then to Iowa, which is a huge rivalry for them. Their non-conference wins, to name a few: North Carolina, Villanova, and
Yes.
St. John's. So in the non-con, they're beating these blue bloods like NBT. So first of all, shout out to TJ Altelberger. This is his
Oh, yeah.
second year as a coach. I mean, just really turning around the culture in Ames. But they're just a team you really don't want to play against. Like, I'm so sorry, Missouri, that you have been slated to play against Iowa State. Out of all the Big 12 teams that aren't Kansas, this would be on my list. I do not want to play against this Iowa State Cyclones team, because they are just going to tire you out offensively. Like, their defense is so sound, and they're not overly physical, but they're not going to let you get anything easy. And I know that we've said that previously for other teams, but with Iowa State specifically, they are really going to pressure you into taking bad shots. And I mean, offensively, they don't have a great perimeter shooting style offense, but they get into the paint more than I think anyone else in the Big 12, possibly more than Baylor. I don't quite know, but I know that they had 34 points in the paint against against Kansas State, excuse me. And they force turnovers like it's no one's business. They convert the turnovers like it's nobody's business. They're just a really, really efficient team. So when you put all of those factors together, a stout defense, one that has a high basketball IQ, one that takes advantage of every turnover they cause, and one that can convert a lot of points in the paint and make you pay and run out the clock. It's a slog. It's a slog to
Which
get.
is the opposite of what Missouri wants. Yes.
And Missouri does not want that.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is going to be a really tough game for Missouri. This Iowa State team is definitely not one to mess with, and their losses have only been to Kansas State, which we've talked about as a great team. We haven't really talked about them yet in terms of their matchup, but they've been a great team this year. And to Oklahoma State. They've already beaten Baylor, OU, Texas, and then they beat Kansas State later on. So Sorry, they lost to Kansas. I keep saying Kansas State, uh, but yeah. Long story short,
They're
this is
good.
probably the toughest Big 12 team, and I'm sorry, Missouri fans. This is going to be
Yeah.
a rough one.
It's been said the coaching I think is just tremendous, and that this is like strength on strength here, where it's Missouri has done such a great job this season of not turning the ball over, but if they do, it's going to come against this Iowa State team because just of like you said of how they play, and that's where I mean let's call it what it is too. Missouri's got like their big three offensively. Like they've gotten Isaiah Mosley back playing again, Kobe Brown, Demoy Hodge. They can all go for 25 at any point, any of those three guys. But defensively, they are a mess sometimes. And, Iowa State, I think more, as we said, defensively is kind of where they're at. Like that's their strength, but they're still a team that will be able to score some points and make things difficult there. So I think two teams that again, it's like this is a common theme here. Two teams that are going to turn you over, and it's just a matter of like who. I mean, it really is like Tennessee, Texas, Missouri, Iowa State. All these teams force a lot of turnovers, but it's like who is able to counter that with more kind of efficient offense. And Missouri's done a really good job of doing that this season, but this is why I did not pick this. And I was, we're talking about it. We're going to transition to the other game in a second that for some reason I've convinced myself it's my upset pick. But I said, I don't know if I can go with this one because I just think Iowa State is, like you said, I think you can make the case that they are the best team there. And it's just with how they play, I worry a little bit about Missouri. But that place is going to be rocking, another great atmosphere. Like that's just going to be a fun one to look at. All right, Christine, I'm ready for you to tell me that I'm crazy because a lot of other people have already done that in the comments, I'm
Okay.
sure, in our last video. Don't worry. So here was my justification. Okay. I said, look, I have to pick an upset
Yeah.
somewhere. And I don't really see Kentucky beating Kansas as an upset, in my opinion, now. So if I'm going to pick one somewhere, I said, I think it's going to be Missouri, Iowa State, or, oh boy.
Are you still Florida, Kansas State?
No, I'm going to say Mississippi State over TCU, which
What?
is, well, I
Oh
told
my,
you, okay? Just hear me
what?
out for a second. All right. I
Okay.
have no I have no great justification for this. Okay. I really don't. And that's a problem when you're picking an upset pick. But because I feel like
Yeah.
I have to pick one.
Yeah.
When you look at the matchup here, this is one of the worst upset picks you could make, I think, because of why. TCU defensively is tremendous. Mississippi State offensively is the opposite of tremendous. And I mean, if you just look at the numbers for Mississippi State, we keep bringing this up. They are 340th nationally in effective field goal percentage. They are 353rd nationally in 3-point percentage, 357th nationally in free throw percentage, 269th and two. They're one of the worst offensive teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow I have convinced myself that that is going to lead to a victory over a TCU team that, quite frankly, is just playing very, very well right now. You talk about a team that has a bunch of close losses. They got 4 on the season. They're all been close.
Mm-hmm.
Exhale.
I'm still waiting for the justification here.
Yeah, there's not a lot I've got to go on. Here's my justification. The game's in Starkville. Okay, that's justification number one. It's a road game for TCU. All right, there's number one. Number two, Mississippi State is a great defensive team. Now they can't score the ball, but they are great defensively, and they just came off a game where they lost by 3 at Alabama, who's the best team I think of any team in this SEC Big 12 Challenge. I think Alabama's the best one out there. They just lost by 3 there and led for a large portion of that game because they used their defense to slow down Alabama. That's on the road. My justification is they're coming back home to Starkville. Give me the Bulldogs in about 3% confidence level to win this game.
Wow.
That's all I got for you. So.
Wow. What a hot take. I don't even know how to go from here. The only thing I think that will help your point is that I think to a little bit of their own detriment, they will play either way up to someone's level or they will play way down to somebody's level. We saw TCU have great games against Kansas State and against Kansas at home. Like they beat Kansas by like 20 at home, which doesn't happen to Kansas ever. And they also completely embarrassed Kansas State over there in Fort Worth. But they just recently lost to West Virginia, who's the second worst team in the Big 12. They haven't been that big of a stronghold this year. So I think, and I didn't get the chance to watch that game, But from what I understand, I'm like, you can't really be like up here, like, oh yeah, we're gonna beat Kansas by 20, and then go lose to West Virginia on the road. So I think that's the only way I can see that being an upset for you. Although I doubt that this TCU team is really gonna go ahead and lose to West Virginia. I will say though, Eddie Lampkin Jr., who has been huge for them this year, they're big inside, getting them a lot of points and getting to the free throw line, and also really crashing the boards. He injured his ankle in the Kansas game, tried to get back in, hobbled around a lot, and then had to be taken off. And then he didn't play in their following game. So if he doesn't play, that's probably going to be a huge factor. But other than that, I mean, I'm going to go with TCU here.
Yeah.
Because they run the floor. They're going to embarrass you.
I'm trying.
I'm sorry. I would, if you were talking upsets, I would have done Florida at Kansas State. Would have been.
I don't know about that one. I mean, let's go to that one because
to go off of your take.
Let's get away from this. We're cutting this whole pick out. It's funny. I told Chris in the previous video, I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pick Mississippi State today as my upset pick. And then when I talk to Christine tomorrow, I'm going to pick another upset pick. And I'm going to change my Mississippi State one. That way, if I'm like, oh, no, watch that video. Don't watch that one. Watch the other one. That's where I picked. Just pick it both ways, right? I don't think I can do that. I'm going to stick with Mississippi State, but it may wind up not working well for me. Anyways, but if it does, we're going to do another video, and I'm going to go over for about 15 minutes. So, Florida... Florida and Kansas State. You seem more confident that we could see an upset here than I am because I look at this Kansas State team and I really like what they're doing. Florida's playing much better now. I think that's a reason you could point to because I do think Florida's one of those teams for the longest time, and it's still that way. They haven't lost to just a bad team this season. Like they played a lot of. I mean, again, when I say Oklahoma and West Virginia, I don't think they're bad teams. Maybe in the context of the Big 12 compared to the others, but still, I don't think they're bad teams. And so, Florida's playing better. They've really started to kind of turn a corner, I think, over the past several weeks. They once again, it's like they can defend. What do you know? And maybe that's kind of something you can look at here. Colin Castleton, I mean, he's he's your usual SEC Player of the Year type guy. He's very, very good, as we know, 6'11". And so he will give Florida, I think, a lot of things. So I think that's something that I could look at. But for me, this is like atmosphere too. I mean, this is in Manhattan. If this was in Gainesville, maybe I changed my opinion a little bit. But I love Jerome Tang. Like I think he's done such a great job. But I don't see it. I don't see it for Florida.
Listen, before I say what I'm about to say, this is a no disrespect to Jerome Tang. I love that man. I respect that man very greatly. And I'm so proud of everything he's already done in Kansas State. I mean, this team looks heads and tails different from when Liberace was there. But what?
Nothing. Keep going.
The Octagon of Doom is not the Octagon of Doom unless Kansas is there. Like, I don't know what you've experienced from this Manhattan home game era, but like,
come on, they're a top 5 team still. Come on, they've got to have something there,
right? It ain't it. That's all I can say. That ain't it. So I really don't know if the home game, I guess, advantage is going to mean that much against this Florida team. I think the only person that's going to be hyped for this is Keontae Johnson. And I think that he's going to be wanting to just show them what they've been missing completely from 3. And but he's not a good 3-point shooter. So I'm like, listen, bro, if you're trying to like keep it going from the perimeter, you're going to have some problems. So just do what you do. Go to the field.
He's been so good, hasn't he? Like he's been so good this season. Like, oh my goodness.
My eyes are not. I can't take my eyes off Keontae Johnson. To be honest, I'm like, I didn't even realize I was wearing purple today. But like, sorry, Jerome Tang. This is me saying that I still support you. I just feel like if there's going to be an upset, it could be with Kansas State, who's been playing really well lately. They only have 2 losses, one to TCU in Big 12 play, TCU and Iowa State, and their only non-conference losses to Butler. So I do think a loss is coming their way, and then I think they're going to lose to Kansas in Allen Fieldhouse. But also, like, shout out to Marquise Noel.
Yeah.
Another man I just love watching. I mean, he's 5'8", but that dude bulldogs his way to any shot he wants. Starts so many defensive steals and transition plays. Like that dude is a dog, you know?
Yeah.
Like I hate when people say that, but I keep saying that now, so I'm just owning it. But that dude is a dog. They're a really special team this year. I just think as far as looking at all these slates go, like you said, I don't think Texas Tennessee is that big of an upset because I don't think Texas is going to win. Kansas versus Kentucky isn't an upset, so that leaves us with these games. And I think TCU is going to beat Mississippi State, so that leaves me here with either Arkansas, Baylor, or Florida at Kansas State. So I guess I'll go with that to be trendy.
Well, I mean, surely one of us is going to be right. So,
and then I can come back on here and like gloat to you for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. You can come back on next year when we do the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Oh, wait. Sorry.
That is just sad. Don't come in here.
Are you come on for the ACC Challenge next year? Are you gonna? No.
No. Okay. What is that going to be a thing?
I'm just curious. I'm just asking.
I don't want that.
All right, that's fine.
I forget all who's in the ACC in football versus basketball sometimes.
You know, there's going to be an SEC Big 12 game in the tournament somehow, so we'll have you on to talk about that.
Okay. I love bracketology. I'll come back on and we'll talk
bracketology. There you go. You're going to be our resident bracketology expert. So we just put out one of those videos this morning, actually. So
love that. It's finally time. It's like my Christmas.
It is.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, like this is when we keep saying that. Like this is when games start to really matter. Not that they don't all season, but like this is when you're building your resume. So, some teams got a chance to do it here. All right, let's see what we got left here because again, we're not going to discuss some of these games. All right, actually, here you go. Let's just talk about these three. We don't have to go in depth, but I'm curious your thoughts on these three. We're going to quickly run through them. All right, Auburn, West Virginia.
Yeah.
LSU, Texas Tech. Oklahoma State, Ole Miss. Anything you would like to comment on with those three games? Any strong opinions?
I don't know about strong opinions. We'll go with like slight opinions. I think Auburn's definitely going to beat West Virginia. I don't think that's breaking any brains. Oh, what's your about?
I think we actually picked West Virginia. I think we did. So
wow.
Hey, yeah.
I'm a little shook about that. I mean, especially now that Auburn's coming off of a loss, I think that they're going to be like, oh, no, this game really matters now. Like, we really got to pay attention to this.
You know what happens is, like, I think because we watch, like, again, you're like pointing out, like, this Kansas State team could have some of these flaws. Like, we're doing the same with, like, Auburn. It's like because we just are watching every single, and we're like, oh, yeah. Well, I don't trust them. Like, so I wonder if that's kind of where we're headed here on these kind of games. So
I think so. Like, when you become more of an analyst and less of a fan, let me preface this by saying there definitely are fans that are fair and they're able to talk.
Yeah.
Like they know the flaws of their team and address them, but then there are also other fans that just disregard all of them. But when you kind of analyze teams like this on a regular basis, you become hyper fixated on these very small details where you're like, ooh, like this could happen. And it'll probably only happen like one every 8 games. Where you're like, I do it. So I don't really trust this West Virginia team this year. And even though I guess they're going to Morgantown, Morgantown's pretty tough. Their fan base is a rough one. So that one's going to get chippy, I think. But I do believe that Auburn now, after they lost to Texas A&M this week, they're going to be looking ahead to this game, thinking, all right, we gotta pick this back up and then go back into SEC play with a win under our belt. So I think Auburn's going to win this one.
I can see it. I think that may actually be one of the better games because you know how Bruce Pearl and Bob Huggins want to play. Like their teams, there are some similarities there in terms of how they play.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have anything we want to add on LSU, Texas Tech, or Oklahoma State, Ole Miss? Because these feel like the two games that are probably going to get the least attention, and I mean for obvious reasons.
I will be going to bed. I'm just kidding. But I probably, aren't like, again, we talked about this with the Alabama-Oklahoma game. If there's a better matchup at 8 p.m., I'm on that one. I really don't have a lot of thoughts on this game, to be honest. Oklahoma State, I think similarly to Texas, in my opinion, they don't have a true identity. Like defensively, they're strong.
Yeah.
I mean, like take a drink every time I say that, but like defensively, they're a good team. Offensively, though, so inconsistent. They don't have a great 3-point threat, and if they're if their two players that shoot well aren't shooting well, they're kind of like looking around at each other. What all is going to happen? I haven't watched much of Ole Miss this season, so I can't really say whether one team's going to win over another. But I doubt this really matters much in the
Ole
coming.
Miss is struggling. Yeah, they're just not. I think it's
Oklahoma
going to be a struggle. Yeah.
Oklahoma State is one of those bubble teams right now. So if they're really like, and I know that after last season they were banned from the postseason. If your fans don't know about this, based on an investigation that happened 5 years prior, which Mike Boynton wasn't even at the university for, so it's a whole hullabaloo. But if they're really, really trying to make the NCAA pay for not allowing them to make it to the postseason last year, this is a game that they're going to want to point to be like, hey, we're not a last four out, we're a first four in. Like, give us.
We got to start winning some games. Yeah.
So this is a good one for them. For Ole Miss, I don't know.
They're struggling. I mean, I think this is like one of your games that really could be like in the 50s. Like these two teams, as you said, strengths are what? They're both defense. They're not great offensively. That's it.
And then at that point, you're like, is it great defense or are they just poor shooters?
That's exactly right. Like it's one of those things too. So like this game is definitely down there in terms of probably interest. And well, there's no other game other than this last one that involves two teams that are on. Texas Tech is on an 8-game losing streak. LSU is on a 7-game losing streak. So someone has to win this game.
Yeah.
I have no idea who that's going to be, but someone does.
Someone has to.
And that's all we got for you. Like, what else do we say? By the way, just for reference, Chris and I both picked Texas Tech because
I picked Texas Tech. Honestly, I was like, I don't know how to go with I was like, I really do have Texas Tech here.
Yeah, that's.
But fine. It's just for I love Mark Adams.
Yeah.
As a defensive coach, I think he's great. He's also like secretly very funny. I don't know if you've ever heard any of his.
He is funny.
Yeah, he's like low key funny. But I like Texas Tech. I like them because they have a tougher schedule than LSU, I think, just comparatively. So I think that they're used to a bit tougher competition. So if it comes down to them, I'm gonna go with Texas Tech here. I don't know if this is even an upset anyway. Because
this is just one of those games where, again, someone is going to win. And I agree. I think it's going to be Texas. LSU just can't score, which I know that's been a problem for Texas Tech, but like LSU really, really can't score.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue here. And I just have a hard time believing they're going to find enough offense to win this one. All right. That was it. Like, that's the end of the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Like, prediction or annual preview video. Like, this is it. What do you think about that? Like, there's no more. Yeah. I thought so. Well, this was fun as always, and I know as usual we always go longer than I think we're going to go, but that's fine. I mean, we had a lot to talk about, and I had to pick my Mississippi State upset, so it's fine. So
you'll be hearing from me on Saturday, regardless.
Yeah, probably so. I know that game's going to be a 30-point game, and everybody's going to be messaging me and saying, "Oh, so you're the one that picked that?" Yep. That was me. But in all honesty, Christine, this was a lot of fun as always to catch up with you. I know you're doing other things now, covering UConn women's basketball and such. But again, you're so kind of tapped into the Big 12. And so before we hop off, let everybody know where they can find all of your great thoughts, which I'm sure you'll have plenty on the SEC Big 12 Challenge in favor of the Big 12. But let everybody know where they can find all of your stuff.
Well, thank you, Blake. Obviously, it's such a pleasure always to talk hoops with you. Like, love talking Big 12 SEC Challenge, and hopefully we can get some bracketology stuff going soon.
Yep.
Yeah, you can follow me at CB on Sports. They're my initials, Christine Butterfield at CB on Sports. On Twitter, I will be parked on my couch all day, just enjoying the Big 12 SEC Challenge. So I will probably be live tweeting the entire time, and I tweet out a lot of basketball hoops updates. So go ahead and give me a follow on there if you like college basketball, because who doesn't?
Yeah, right. If you're watching this, if you don't, something's wrong. No, be sure to follow Christine. As I said, she knows her stuff, and always great to discuss things with her related to the SEC, the Big 12, NCAA tournament, all kinds of fun stuff. So we will definitely have her on again here soon. But as always, we appreciate you guys watching, be sure to hit that subscribe button. As we said, we've already got another picks video. Chris did our picks, or we both did our picks for the SEC Big 12 games, went through, picked every game, just kind of like we did here. But we wanted to go a little bit more in depth on the Big 12 side in this one. So check everything out. Be sure to check out our sponsor, BROTHROW. We've been talking about them a lot. Click on that description below, and you can find the link to BROTHROW there. You can bet on these games if you want. I'm sure we will have some bets in there as well. So be sure to check all that out. And again, we appreciate you guys as always. And we'll talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.